Hey, this is Scott. I'm going to show you how to change out the transmission on the exmark 30 or the commercial on exmark 30 commercial or on a Toro Timemaster. They're the same transmission. The only difference is this pulley on top of the transmission is different than on. It's a little bit smaller on the Toro, and that's why the Toro is a little bit faster. Otherwise, the procedure is the same. First thing you're going to know. Okay, so you need to do the transmission change in the exmark of the Toro are these tools right here. Some sort of needle nose, some sort of gripping to grab a spring with. You need an extender, 3/8, ½ inch, 9/16, ratchet, and a hammer. That's all the tools you need to change the transmission in the Toro Timemaster or the exmark commercial. Oh yeah, and one of these guys. That's it. Notice when you flip yours over. Yours is going to be a little bit different than mine because I've done this a few times. Yours is going to have some gold colored bracket in this area. You could just remove that, you'll never need it again. Yours is also going to have some black plastic covering over the axle. You could get rid of that too. It doesn't serve any purpose. I'm sure people will say it does. I've been going about 2 years without it and haven't had an issue on either machine. First thing you're going to do is you're going to take off the tires. 9/16 fits on it, and just take off the tire. The nut comes off, you just lift the tire up. So after you unloosen your nut with the 9/16, the tire should just lift up and off. There's a bearing inside, and there's the gear drive mechanism. All this right here comes off. Depending on what year yours was made, and if it's the exmark of the Toro, you're either going to have a little C-clip right here, or it might be a Carter pin. This pinion gear, this drive gear has to come off. So put a screwdriver in there, put a screwdriver in here, pry it off. And that'll allow this gear to come off. There's a washer here too. That sits on this side. Oh, no, that sits right there. Next, we're going to remove this nut, this bolt. It's a ½ inch. Okay, now this might sound a little weird. What we do is keep this part on still, and then release the other tire. On this side, the problem I had getting the wheel off was there was a burr that was right here in the metal. I had to just file that down a little bit so I could get this bearing off. Hopefully I'll be able to get it back on. Yeah. Alright, so on this wheel we're going to do the same on the opposite side. Okay. It's important to take note of the height adjuster and how it's set up. It's the gold or silver bracket. Then it's the black handle. Then it's the spacer that the gear drive goes on top of. And this is a ½ inch. This is a pulley to break it loose. And that part will come off really easy, which is why we do this side first. Washer. And I'm going to put the camera down so I could just tap that with the hammer to get it off. There's 2 other bolts holding the axle in place. You need to remove those also. Now once you have the transmission to the point where it's as loose as it's going to get, on the one side. You might need to tap it with a hammer on this side to get, wait, hold on. Now on the original side, to get this piece off after you broke the other one out, what you'll probably have to do is hold this part up, line up everything. Once the transmission's loose, which there's one other thing you have to release the belt drive, and there's a spring tensioner here. You have to release those two things to totally release the transmission. Then what you do is you tap on the top with a hammer, and that'll get with a screwdriver to get it to release past this point. If it doesn't release freely for you, depending on how many hours that you have on it and how much rust is there, it might not come all the way off without a little persistence. After you have this piece off and the transmission is free, what you need to do is lift the transmission towards the tall end so the short end can come out. You might have to twist it a little bit. Can't really do it like this. I forgot about the speed adjuster cable. Turn your transmission around. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but basically you just put like a pair of needle nose in there and squeeze this so it can come out. And there's a little hook that goes onto this back side right here that you can see on the new transmission, and that just disconnects that. You then lift the transmission up, twist a little bit, and pull it down. You want to lift it up on the tall end to get the bottom to release, and then you angle it out. Okay. So now to put the new transmission in, which I don't really need to put a new transmission in, I'm doing this for show, so I'm going to put the old one back in because it was still working fine, but I keep getting questions about people telling me how to put the new one in. You're going to do all the steps the same way, but in reverse. So you're going to start with hooking up your cable. This hooks into here, and this part feeds into the back. Got to mention, because I'm using the same one, is this gold bracket, don't forget about it. This has to go back on. That's the one that mounts right in here. This gold bracket. So make sure you put that onto the new transmission. The transmission doesn't have to lay in perfect right now, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that the speed adjuster cord isn't caught where the pulley is. Make sure that that's still free. You don't have to have the transmission hooked up to the belts yet, but you want to make sure that the belts are there. Next thing you could do is mount this to here. I think I forgot to tell you before, but it's a 3/8 that attaches this bolt right here. Something I forgot to mention that's going to make adjusting where the placement of transmission is. On your old transmission, you'll see a spot right here that's worn off. Take note of which way this bracket was mounted ahead of time, whether it was face up or face down. And this line right here, where the bearing was, line your two transmissions next to each other and put a little score mark on your new one where it would be, so it'll give you a good reference point of where you need to be when you're adjusting this transmission. It's going to be loose when you first put it in, but when you put this tensioner spring on, that'll keep it in place. Don't forget which direction these things go. This is your center post. This is where the bearing goes. A good use for used motor oil is to just put on the outside of this bearing, and that'll help lubricate it, and also it'll help help it slide on place. It's probably not going to fit perfectly well because it's used and it's a different size new piece of machinery. So looks like this one might need a little assistance with the hammer. Now with the spacer in place, we're going to fasten our half-inch bolt down. Next, we put on the drive gear, followed by our C-clamp. This whole thing fits on with the washer on top. Put the drive wheel on and put the nut back in place. Then flip it over. When you flip your machine over, if you're not careful, this will disengage. It's an easy fix. You just have to line it up when you turn the machine back over and let the weight of it work itself back down. Okay, so we line up the adjuster bracket, put it in its place, and set the spacer in on top of it. You might need to use the hammer to get this down a little bit. However, one thing to be aware of is not to keep hitting this bearing indefinitely, because you want to make sure it's actually lined up right here. You might be missing where it's lined up. So make sure that it's lined up and you're not just smacking the bearing and destroying it. After this, I'm going to put a bolt in. We're going to have to make an adjustment. We'll have to slide the transmission upwards a little bit. And then we'll put our C-clamp on top. And again, the easiest way to adjust the transmission is grab the spring, release a little bit of tension. You don't have to take the spring all the way off, and just slide the transmission up. Then we put the washer on, our tire, and the nut. Now you may notice after you start yours up, there's some oil burning off. That's because when it was on its side, some oil was leaking into the valves into the cylinder head and down the cylinder. It'll take about 5 or 10 minutes for that to burn off. But otherwise, you're good to go. It also might take you a few pulls to get it to start. Let's see if we go cut some grass.